Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Jordan here, the PH is silent, and in this video we're talking about Princes of the Apocalypse. This is the first module that was released by Wizards of the Coast that was published when all three of the core books had been released. So the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide were out, and so this was the first adventure that could kind of utilize all of those. Although they did have to release a supplement that had added extra elemental spells and the Genasi race sub-race into this adventure so that you could play those. Princes of the Apocalypse is a sandboxy module where it starts out as a missing person kind of quest, and it turns into you saving Faerun from these forces of elemental evil. Now, when I say sandboxy, it is a sandbox, but the level adjustment is kind of odd for certain regions, and your party can get into unnecessary danger if you're not careful. So it's really up to you, the Dungeon Master, to feed a specific amount of information at the right times to kind of nudge your players into the right direction. There's a problem if they dig too deep. They might get overwhelmed with monsters.
The dwarves delved too greedily and too deep.
Although retreat is always an option, there isn't really a retreat mechanic built into this system, so it can be kind of, you have to make it up as you go along. This adventure, Princes of the Apocalypse, starts at level 3, but if you are a purist and you want to start at level 1, there is a 1, 2, 3 mini adventure in chapter 6, and why they didn't put this at the beginning really makes me feel like Wizards of the Coast wanted you to start at level 3. Also, if you are coming off of the starter set, The Lost Mine of Phandelver, then you can easily transition into Princes of the Apocalypse just using those characters. Even though you'll start at level 5 rather than level 3, the first little bit, your players can just feel powerful. They finish Lost Mine of Phandelver, they're very strong, they're in the world, they don't have a lot of competition until they start getting deeper into these elemental dungeons, these temples, and that's when they can get a big clue in of the world is a little more dangerous than we thought. Now, I found this a little difficult to talk about without spoilers, so perhaps at this point, if you are playing in or plan to play in Princes of the Apocalypse, maybe save this video for when you finish your campaign. But if you are a dungeon master, my plan is to cover the lore and history, the behind the scenes of this adventure, so that you kind of have an understanding going in to what you're about to run. Diving into the myth, the lore of Princes of the Apocalypse, let's start with the area you'll be roaming around for the majority of this adventure, the Dessarin Valley. The Dessarin Valley is nestled between the Sword Mountains and the High Forest. Going way back into Faerun history in negative 4,420 DR, a shield dwarf kingdom was built here in the valley called Basilmer. Founded by Torhild Flametongue, Basilmer was an odd settlement for dwarves because it was built above ground. The idea was that they would be able to mine and support their nearby mining through farming. Soon, though, the kingdom fell under attack by giants and trolls. This attack forced the dwarves to go back to basics and build kingdoms underground. So they started construction on Tyre Bessel in negative 4,320 DR. The dwarves built up the area, including a large bridge called Stone Bridge that went across the river Dessarin. This connected the east and west sides of Basilmer and the valley together. The bridge was also a temple to the dwarven god Moradin and was about 2 miles in length, made famous because this was the site that Torhild Flametongue died fighting a hill giant in solo combat. True to dwarven architecture and craftsmanship, the bridge is still standing today. After Torhild was killed, the other dwarves fled the area and abandoned Tyre Basil. It was rediscovered in 893 DR by an adventuring company called Knights of the Silver Horn. They went in and constructed strongholds around the entrances to Tyre Basil, but eventually they were run out, along with most humans in the Dessarin Valley, by orcs, trolls, and drow raids. These old strongholds became known as the Haunted Keeps, which you'll discover in Princes of the Apocalypse. Now, with Waterdeep expanding in 1000 DR, new villages started to appear that were within arm's reach of Waterdeep. These settlements are Yatar, Tribor, and Red Larch, where our adventure begins. These young villages sit atop the ruined Tyre Basil, which the elemental cult has infiltrated, making it their base of operations. The above-ground settlement of Basilmer eventually became known as the Halls of the Hunting Axe. Briefly occupied by the Delzoun dwarves, it is now home to monsters and is the burial place of Torhild Flametongue, which your party can explore in some of the side treks in Chapter 6. Now, the ruins of Tyre Basil have been taken over, unknowingly, by the cults of elemental evil. They are the cult of Black Earth, the cult of the Eternal Flame, cult of the Howling Hatred, and cult of the Crushing Wave. As you'll read in the Princes of the Apocalypse module, these elemental factions each have an element they are a friend to and one that they hate. They are led by nihilistic prophets. These cults are together dedicated to the Elder Elemental Eye and are trying to summon the princes of elemental evil. Now, before the dwarves built their underground kingdom of Tyre Basil, a renegade group of drow built a shrine to an ancient evil and forgotten deity, the Elder Elemental Eye. The drow cult was wiped out somehow, and the dwarves did discover the shrine while building their underground fortress, but they couldn't clean out the ruins, so it was left alone and the fortress was built above it. Centuries later, a powerful drow wizard named Viserion de Veer, who was a devout of the Elder Elemental Eye, discovered the shrine when he was thrown out of drow society for not worshipping Lolth. Using the power of this area, he crafted 4 elemental weapons: Ironfang, Drowned, Windvange, and Tinderstrike. One for each of earth, water, air, and fire. The weapons are linked to the extraplanar princes of the elemental evil, and Viserion left them on an altar of the Elder Elemental Eye for their fated bearers to discover. These weapons are the heart of your story. They have been pulling cultists and monsters into the valley. The elemental planes exist within the multiverse of the Forgotten Realms. There are elemental planes for each element and quasi-elemental planes that combine 2 or more elements. On the spectrum, the elements usually get along with the ones next to them and are directly opposed to the opposite end. For instance, Earth respects fire and water but sees no value in air, and vice versa. The plane of water gets along fine with air and earth but detests fire. The Elder Elemental Eye is tied to Tharsden, the Mad God. I have a video talking more about Tharsden and how he created the Abyss. In short, he betrayed the other gods and threw a shard of pure evil into the elemental chaos, which tore down and festered into the Abyss. In retaliation, the gods locked him up in a dimension known as Void Harrow. Left there with his powers intact, he is too crazy to attempt escape, but he does have moments of lucidity and plots revenge. In one of these moments, he crafted a persona of the Elder Elemental Eye and communicated with evil acramentals, who are powerful beings of the elemental planes that rule over lesser elementals. Think archdevils of the Nine Hells or demon lords of the Abyss. These are the big guys of the elemental planes. They are also referred to as primordials. It is these evil elemental primordials that our cult is attempting to summon and wreak havoc on Faerun. It's important to note that this was an old Greyhawk adventure that had been updated to fit into the Forgotten Realms. This is why we have Tharsden and the Elemental Primordials. Originally, it was the Temple of Elemental Evil for Greyhawk, published in 1985, and that module was rated the 4th greatest Dungeons & Dragons adventure of all time. So right now I want to focus on the fact that I've called this a sandbox adventure, and it is, but there are certain temples that you need to be a certain level in order to have confidence that you can get through it. And that's where this adventure kind of fails you, because although you are open, your players are open to go to any elemental temple they want, there is a certain order that will level them up and maximize their level ability, so that they're not level 6 and they go to a level 12 dungeon. Now, I did a lot of research in this. Not only did I read the module, but I was reading reviews about other people, what other people were saying, and kind of getting a feel for how they would run it as well. And Sly Flourish had a really great idea where he put elemental locks on the doors so that your players could go into the temples, but they couldn't go further down, or they couldn't get to places that they weren't necessarily powerful enough to get to yet. That can work. Another thing that I was thinking of is you could kind of hint overall to your players that there is a order within the elemental wheel. And if they follow that order, they'll have a certain advantage. So you can really instigate that they need to go to this element and kind of finish that temple and then go to this one, etc., etc. Another mechanic in this game is that a lot of stuff happens when your players leave the temple, but I don't feel like they really necessarily have a reason to leave the temple once they're starting to explore all of these temples of elemental evil. And so giving a mechanic of leveling up back at home base is going to want to leave the temple, regroup, level up, extra stuff happens, and that's when they get spurred to go back into another temple of a different element. So I really think, and granted, I want to be honest with you guys, I haven't played this. I've only read it several times and lots of reviews and studied the hell out of it, but I have not played this adventure. But it seems to me like a really good, if you want your players to level up before they go to that dungeon and you want them to return to home base, have them exit, have them like spend a week leveling up, so to speak, and use the level up mechanic like that. Now, speaking of leveling, I think all Wizards of the Coast modules are leaning towards doing milestone experience rather than regular experience. This adventure doesn't particularly say use milestone or use the other one. Like other adventures like Storm King's Thunder kind of says, please just use milestone experience. But for this one, I really feel like you should be using milestone because it is like we defeated a temple. We can go back after that temple, level up in our home base, and then go back in and fight in another temple. So doing milestone experience, your players will kind of get a sensation that when they beat a certain temple, they can go back and level up. And I think that's a fun mechanic, and I think that's a good mechanic that pushes your players in the correct direction for this adventure to succeed, for this module to be a success with your players. And of course, I'll put links in the description to all of these articles that I pulled from Sly Flourish's article, for example, and you can read them as well and see if you like them. See if they'll help you. Overall, I really like this adventure. It's very modular, and I think this is a good adventure not only for dungeon masters who want to run it just as a straight module, but those dungeon masters that like to pick dungeons out and use specific parts of adventure. They almost feel like a collection of one-shots because each of the temples are so different, and there is a theme that connects all of them, but you could literally take this temple and just play it anywhere. And speaking of that, although this game does take place in the Forgotten Realms, they've made this module fit over the realms. And so there's listings in the back on how to make this work in Dark Sun, in Greyhawk, in Eberron, in whatever your homebrew setting is. One of the major things that it changes, though, is the factions. And factions, again, play an important part into these modules because they were used for Adventure League, and Adventure League plays heavily on those factions. So if you enjoy factions, which they're a fun part of the D&D experience, I think, then this is also a good module for you, and your players will get more out of it if they do join a faction. I think your players will get the most out of it if all of them join the same faction, because then they're kind of like working for the Harpers or they're working for the Emerald Enclave. But it could also be like you go off and you get like a certain sneaky mission from the Zentarum, and you have to everybody has their own like submission for their specific factions. If you're curious, I've made videos on all of the factions in D&D. There's a link down below, and you can learn about the various factions that you can become a part of as a player. I always like to talk about this. Why should you run this adventure? Well, if you want to play an adventure that kind of has a classic feel, this was an older module that they then updated and put into Faerun, so it has a lot of fun things, and it's stood the test of time, so to speak. So it's a faithfully updated module, and I think that's a good reason to run it. Like if you want to get a classic feel for your Dungeons and Dragons game. You enjoy elementals. Maybe you're a fan of the Genasi. You like all of those elemental spells that were later encapsulated in Xanathar's Guide. But as also a standalone supplement, you want to just play an elemental druid. I think this could be a really fun adventure to run if players are excited about stuff like that. This is a little different from games like The Hoard of the Dragon Queen and other ones that I haven't reviewed yet, where you're not necessarily traveling all over Faerun. You kind of stay within the Dessarin Valley, and there is travel, but it's not everywhere. So if you like the idea of not... This sounds weird, but like not everybody wants to just explore all of the Sword Coast. And so if you like this aspect of just kind of, I have to solve this problem that's right here in front of me, and maybe we go here and there, but there's not a lot of travel mechanics, then I think this is a good adventure for you as well. It works really good with Lost Mine of Phandelver. I want to emphasize that again. So if you're coming off of Lost Mine of Phandelver, this is a natural transition to start playing this game. Also, it's really modular. So maybe you don't want to play this game at all, but like if you really need that water temple dungeon that you want to run, then pick this up because it's just very like I can take this and we can play a night of D&D. You guys can roll 7th level characters and we can play through this dungeon in like 3 to 4 hours. It kind of feels like a book of one-shots And that's not a bad thing. I think that's really helps this adventure stand out. Also, if your players enjoy dungeons, there is roleplay aspect, there's a lot of other stuff, but like if they like exploring the unknown, this module is chock full of dungeons. So I would definitely recommend to the dungeon master that knows his players want to explore and do some hack and slash stuff, maybe solve some puzzles along the way. And I think that's about it. I like this adventure. Again, I have not ran it, but I've read it several times and I've researched it, so I feel like I have I can form an opinion about it, but take my opinion with a grain of salt. And let me know in the comments below what you think about this adventure. If you're interested in like the factions of Faerun, then I would click right here for a playlist on those. If you are interested in other campaign explained videos like the Lost Mine of Phandelver, I would click right over here. Please subscribe to the channel for more of these because I'm going to be going through all of the published adventures that Wizards of the Coast has released and create a lore video on them. If you liked this video, hit a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you all in the next video.